Hi there, Ford owners. Today in your 2020 Ford F-350 Super Duty, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Airlift's LoadLifter XL airbags. Before we install our airbags, we're going to go ahead and hit our test course just to get a baseline of how our truck feels. We're going to start on our bumps course, and it's going to be an uneven bump section first, and this is going to simulate like hitting a pothole. And we can feel it rock here. It's not too bad. Our suspension actually feels pretty stiff on this truck already. But I do suspect that with the airbags back there, it can help soften it out just a little bit, especially if you keep the air pressure a little bit lower. As you increase that pressure, it does make it a little bit stiffer. And when you get towards the upper echelon of what that bag's rated for, it does get very stiff. Next, we're going to be going into the even bump section. And this is going to simulate going over a speed bump or maybe pulling in and out of your driveway. And when we hit the bumps here, we can feel in the back, it does still feel pretty stiff. We've got a little bit of bounce up and down, but it's not too bad. I do feel like our airbags are going to help stiffen that out. And then lastly here, we're going to be going into our slalom section where we're going to simulate an evasive maneuver. And this is really where I noticed the airbags, it seems like, the most when we're hauling a lot of heavy weight and things like that. With the addition of the airbags, it helps out a lot with reducing sway. So we're going to go ahead and get into it now. And again, the suspension on this truck is actually pretty good. It does got a little bit of sway here, but it's not terribly bad, but I expect the bags to really make a big difference there. And the more weight we load this up, the worse it's going to be. So I could see where when you're putting this truck towards its upper limits, that it could get a little bit squirrely there. And this is what our airbags look like when they're installed. They go between your frame and your axle, and they provide additional assistance for any loads that you have in your truck, whether it be a trailer that you've hooked up to the hitch at the back or a load that you've placed inside the bed. Now, this doesn't increase the carrying capacity of your vehicle, it just helps to support it. So the main purpose of this here is once you load up the back of your truck, typically the back end sags down. And this will cause poor handling and braking performance, as well as point your headlights up towards the sky, making it more difficult to see at night. By adding airbags here in the back, we can pressurize the bags to lift up on the rear of the vehicle to help restore it to its factory ride height. That's going to restore the lost braking and handling performance we had, as well as level out our headlights. Some additional benefits you can also get from airbags is reduction in sway, because as our bags are pressurized on each side, when the weight wants to shift to one, the bag wants to stay in its normal position here. So it's going to be pushing back up, so that can help minimize how much sway we have back and forth. It can also help increase your ride quality. If you've got just a little bit of air in here, it can help soften up the ride a little bit and make your suspension just a little bit more comfortable. Now, once you load this thing up pretty heavily and you air it up really heavy, you can notice a stiffer suspension, so you want to try to match that air pressure with your load to find that perfect comfort and ride height. Sometimes you are just going to have to put a lot of pressure in there to achieve that factory ride height again, and it might stiffen up your ride a little bit to be a little bit more unpleasant for the ride quality, but it's worth it for the handling, braking benefits you're going to get. And even though it's not going to be quite as soft on the ride quality, it's going to reduce driver fatigue because you're going to feel like you have more control over your heavy rig. These bags here are the XL series LoadLifter from Airlift, and they have a slightly larger bag size with a 7-inch diameter, and that increases the volume of air inside the bag. What that does is increases the carrying capacity of the bag from the normal 5,000 pounds that the regular LoadLifters have to 7,500 pounds on the XL series here. They still use between 5 and 100 psi air pressure. It's that extra large volume inside that offers the extra carrying capacity. One of the things I do recommend with airbags is a compressor system. That way you have an onboard system to be able to adjust your airbags. If you do a lot of loading and unloading, I really recommend it because typically you're going to start either with a load or with no load. You got to get to your destination. Once you get there and you either add a load or remove a load, you now need to adjust your airbags because if they're fully aired up and you got no load, it's going to be extremely stiff. You're going to hate the way it rides with it aired up. You need to bring that back down to get a good ride quality. But then once you load it back up again, you're going to need to bring your ride height back to where it was, and you want to load it up. And often there's not just going to be an air compressor laying around at all the different sites you're going to be at. Putting one on board gives you control at your fingertips to adjust your pressure whenever you want. We also offer tanks available that you can put on the compressor system so you can have some onboard air for some small air tools. Now that we've got our airbags installed, we're going to go ahead and hit our test course once again to see how it differs. We're going to start in the uneven bump section again, and I can definitely feel there's a difference there in the back. It feels quite a bit stiffer than it did before. It's not uncomfortable, but you can definitely feel a little bit more of an impact. There's less kind of bounce to it, and it's just more solid. Next, we're going to be going into our even bump section. And this is going to mimic going over a speed bump or in and out of your driveway. And here we come up on this one. And it's really not too much different than the uneven bump section. You can definitely tell it's a little stiffer. There's less bounce in the back. Once we go over that bump, it kind of immediately levels itself back out without a bunch of up and down oscillations. We're now going to head into the slalom section, and this is usually where I notice it quite a bit because it does work with reducing sway. As we want to load down, as the weight wants to shift to one side, that bag wants to push it back up to keep us upright. And wow, yeah, it does feel pretty darn good here in the back. Like, you can feel it's really stiff. There's almost no sway. It had great suspension before, but it definitely feels like it made a big difference in the amount of sway that we've got here. I mean, you can really almost, it has like no roll. It's just kind of us going around a little bit in here. Now, it felt pretty good to me out there on the test course. We're going to go ahead and head back into the shop, and we'll show you how we got it installed. We'll begin our installation underneath the vehicle. We're going to be removing the jounce bumper from both the driver and the passenger side. The jounce bumper is located here just above the axle where it attaches to the frame. There's a stud that comes down on each side. You can see the one here on the rear of the jounce bumper. There's one just like it on the other side of the jounce bumper. We're going to remove that nut with a 15mm socket. We'll then remove the one on the other side and then drop the jounce bumper down. We'll just slide the jounce bumper down and get it out of the way. And you'll see here's our two studs here. We actually need to remove both of those studs, and that's easily done using a flat-bladed screwdriver. To do this, I just want to take your flat-bladed screwdriver, get underneath the metal there, and then just pry it down, and then you can slide the bolt right out of there just like that. We'll do the same thing with the other one here, and then the ones on the other side as well. We can then take the nut inserts that come in our kit, and they're just going to replace the ones we just removed. Just slide it up in there, and then I find it easiest if you use a screwdriver. You can poke it up through the hole right in the center there, and then push it until it clicks into place just like that. We'll do the same thing with this other hole here, and then of course we're doing this on the other side. We'll now take our upper plate and we're going to put it into position. We're going to take a look here at the upper plate. The cutout that you see here with the rounded edges, this large wide one, is going to go towards the inside of the vehicle. You'll also notice that we have square holes in 3 of the corners, but not in 1. The 2 square holes are going to go towards the front of the vehicle. So once it's up there, it's going to be sitting in this position. In all of the square holes, we're going to take the second longest carriage bolts that come in the kit. We're going to drop them down through those square holes. And then the remaining holes that are in our bracket here, we're going to use the small button head Allen screws to attach it to the nut inserts that we just put in up there. We can then go back and snug those down using a 6mm Allen key. We can then torque those to the specifications found in our instructions. The bracket on the passenger side is going to install the same way in the same orientation with the 2 carriage bolts at the front and the wide cut towards the center. It's going to use all the same hardware and torque the same. We can now assemble our airbag. We're going to place our roll plate on top, lining up the large hole with the larger air fitting hole and the 2 smaller holes with the mounting holes. We'll then take our air fitting, thread it down into the larger hole, and tighten it down with a 9/16 wrench. Now, the fitting here only needs tightened down until you've got a few threads that are coated with the sealant or down inside the bag. So that should be plenty good right about there. We can now take our upper bracket and we're going to set it in place, lining up our holes so we can torque it down. But before you put it on there, the small square hole on the large slide here, it's going to slide over our air fitting. We need to make sure we take a carriage bolt and slide it up through that hole. We'll then just take the hex head bolts that come in your kit, slide on a lock washer and a flat washer, and then attach the two. Once we get these started by hand, we do need to take the bracket, because you can see here the holes are slotted, and we need this to be as far towards the front as possible. So the square holes here are our front of our bracket, so we're just going to slide it all the way over, so that way on the 2 square hole side we've got a gap here. And then we'll just tighten them down with a 9/16 socket. And then we can torque our hardware to the specifications found in our instructions. We'll now move on to the lower pre-assembly. We're going to set our roll plate in place and then move over to the lower bracket where we got to do a little bit of pre-assembly on here. This is the cup that's going to sit on the striker plate that used to contact the old jounce bumper. That's going to sit right here on your lower bracket. It has a square hole in it, and this is the smallest carriage bolt that comes in our kit. We're going to drop that down through the hole, and you can see I've got the ears facing up. We want to make sure we've got it like that. Then on the other side here, we're just going to loosely install the small nut that works with our carriage bolt. We don't want to fully tighten it down because this hole is slotted, and we need to be able to move around and pivot so we can get it in the right orientation. We're also going to take the longest carriage bolts that come included with our kit. We're going to slide those down through the square holes in the center of the bracket. And then lastly, we do have several different adapters that come in our kit to make it work with the appropriate trim package that you've got on your truck. So depending on if you have dual rear wheels and your suspension package and everything, you'll want to refer to the instructions to make sure you're choosing the appropriate bracket for your particular specifications. Ours does not have dual rear wheels. We're going to be using this one right here. It's the medium size length one. It's slightly shorter than these one here, so do pay attention to the numbers on them because they are close in size, but they are slightly different. This guy here is going to attach to the small ear that's sticking out there. There's a square hole in it. This is the second shortest bolt, carriage bolt that comes in your kit. You're going to slide that through, slide your bracket on. Make sure that it's pushed all the way down so it's flush against the bottom of your lower bracket, and then secure it with a nut, and we can go ahead and snug this down. We're just going to use our 9/16 wrench to do so. Now we can take our pre-made lower bracket assembly here. We're going to set it on our lower airbag, and we're going to attach it with the same hardware we used for the upper bracket. Since there's so many moving little parts right here when you're putting the lower bracket on, I recommend you pre-assemble this hardware just because it can be difficult to hold everything together and line up all the holes. So now we've got these loosely installed, we're going to need to slide this one forward as well. So this is the 2 square hole slide on the upper bracket. It needs to go that direction. To get this to work, you're going to have to pull the carriage bolts up because they're going to hit on your roll plate and then slide it forward, just like that. And you can see that they are sticking up and we're slid over. And now we can snug these down. This is the same as the upper, and we're going to torque it the same as well. We also have a bracket that we're going to be placing up on the frame. Now this bracket's going to attach to some pre-existing holes in the frame, your holes may already be utilized if you have a factory hitch or a fifth wheel installed. Our customer does have a fifth wheel, and this is the large bolt here that's attaching the fifth wheel on the driver's side. We're going to remove this bolt, and we're going to be using a 21mm wrench to do so. On the passenger side, you'll need to remove both the bolts that hold the fifth wheel in. On the driver's side, you'll just need to remove the one towards the rear here. Otherwise, those brackets are pretty much identical. We'll now also need to get this bracket assembly out of the way that's holding our brake hoses here. There's two bolts that hold it in. You can easily see one of them here. The other one is just on the other side of this little ear here. It's a little bit harder to see, but it's right on the other side of that. We're going to remove both of these using a 13mm socket. I did go ahead and just pull the hose out of the little slot here. It just made my tool fit in there a little bit easier. And we can now just kind of move this out of the way like this. You can see we can maneuver it around as necessary. We're now going to install the set screw into the frame. If you look here, one side's got a hole for an Allen key to fit in, and the other side doesn't. We want the Allen key to be facing out towards the center of the vehicle. And the other end, we're going to thread into the hole here next to the little slotted hole where we had just removed that bolt from the bracket here. We're going to thread it in about halfway. We want about half the length here sticking out. We're now going to take our upper bracket. This one is slightly different than the passenger side. On the passenger side, the large hole that you see here towards the rear of the vehicle over here on the driver's side is going to be the same on the other side of the bracket. Those are those two fifth wheel bolts that we removed over on the passenger side. On the driver's side, you just got the rear fifth wheel bolt, and right here in the middle you got the slotted hole. It's going to slide over that stud, that set screw that we just put in place. So we're just going to slide it up here, slide our bracket over. The fifth wheel bolt that we removed, we can now just reinstall it. It's going to slide all the way through your bracket, and we're just going to attach it back with the factory hardware. We don't want to fully tighten it down just yet because we do want to leave a little bit of play in the assembly here because it'll make it easier to get our airbags in place. We can also take the bracket we removed here with all of our brake lines on it and slide this over that stud that we had threaded in there, just like that. And then on that stud, we'll thread on a flange nut. And again, we're just going to leave it loose for now so we can have the play we need to get our bags in place. Now, if you didn't have a fifth wheel installed in your vehicle and that hole was just open, there was no bolt there, you would just use the large bolt and lock nut that comes included with your kit. We're not going to be using them because we're using that factory hardware. If you do have a hitch, you'll want to make sure you use that factory hardware for your hitch, not the ones that come included. We're now going to increase the distance between the frame and the axle. We've got ours on a lift here, so I'm using a pole jack underneath our hitch here at the back. But if you're at home doing this on the ground, you can just put your floor jack under the hitch here at the back. And we're just going to increase that gap. If you lift up the back end to where the rear wheels come off the ground, the vehicle can roll because your parking's done with the back here. So you might want to chalk your front wheels just to make sure, in case you do lift it up too high, it's not going to roll on you. We're now going to lift our airbag into position up over the axle. It is a tight fit to get up in here. That's why we got that extra clearance. Make sure you don't get caught on any of your hoses, so just carefully work it around everything. Just kind of take your time with this. All right, and it is a little bit of a fight, as you saw there, to get it in place. You want to make sure that the carriage bolt here sits between the axle and your brake line. On the passenger side, this carriage bolt that here is towards the rear of the vehicle is actually going to be on the outside of the brake line because of the way it's shaped. It kind of actually bends inward, so it's going to be on the inside over there on the passenger side. So now that we've got it set into place, you can see it sitting on our jounce bumper striker right there. The cup is and everything. Double check, see right here, I've actually got my wire pinched underneath here. So just double check all that. We're gonna move that out of the way to make sure none of your wires are pinched. It's really important. And now we can take, that we confirm that we're not pinching or damaging anything. We can take our U-bolt here. We're gonna slide this around our U-bolts that attach our axle to our leaf springs, and we're gonna slide this through the second hole on both sides here. Once you've got it slid through, we're just gonna take some flange nuts. We're gonna thread it on there, and we're just gonna tighten them down just enough by hand right now, just to keep this pulled up against our leaf spring stack there. We can also loosely install our lower clamp. That's gonna slide up over our carriage bolts, and you can see there's a little cutout here. That cutout's gonna line up right with our axle, and these are also going to get flange nuts. So now we're gonna line up our carriage bolts here that we had dropped down with the square holes. And they can be difficult to get them to go together. So what you can do is once you kind of get them lined up, to reduce the gap here, you can let some of the pressure off your jack, and that's going to bring the frame closer to the axle. So I went ahead and removed the pressure off the pole jack at the back, and you can see they slid right on through. They're nice and close together now, and we can easily put those flange nuts on them. You'll have one here towards the rear, two towards the front, and then don't forget the one here in the center that's pointing up that connects to that upper bracket on the frame. Once you get all of your hardware loosely installed, we can now go back and tighten it all down. With your U-bolts, you want to make sure you're going back and forth, tightening them down evenly. We can then go back and torque everything to the manufacturer's specifications. We also want to make sure we snug down the flange nut that holds on the small cup here that we left loose from the pre-assembly step. There's no torque on this, just want to make sure it's snug so that way the hardware doesn't fall out. We can now repeat the same procedures over here on the passenger side. The only differences we already talked about was with the fifth wheel where the upper bracket there is mounted. You're going to use both of the fifth wheel mounting holes on this side. The other small difference is that once this bag's installed, you'll want to clamp on the heat shield that comes in your kit here around your exhaust. And it's very close, so you'll have these little middle sections. We're just using hose clamps to clamp those to this part here, and then we just kind of bent the plate around the exhaust, trying to make sure that there's an air gap between the exhaust, the heat shield, and then as well between the heat shield and the bag. You will need to take the clamp here for the O2 sensor wiring. You have to pull that out of the frame because it's right where our upper bracket goes. But it's as simple as just pulling that little clip out of there. We'll now need to route our airlines. What I like to do first is to take the airline that comes in your kit and fold it in half, and then we're just going to cut it in half. And we're using a special set of hose cutters. You do want to use hose cutters with this because we need to make sure we have nice, clean, square cuts. And you can see after cutting it in half, we do have a nice clean cut, but it's not quite square because we were, bending the hose in half. So now we're just going to straighten it out a little bit and just recut those ends off perpendicular here. And now it's nice, clean, and square. That's going to seal like we needed to into the quick connect fittings. It just simply pushes right into those fittings, but it's important that it's clean and square. You don't want to use wire cutters or side cutters on this. You can get a small hose cutter here at each trailer so you can get good clean cuts like this to ensure you don't have any leaks. We then take our airline and we routed it from the airbag here. We just push inward on our hose and it goes right into the swivel quick connect there. I like to give it just a little tug to make sure it doesn't pull back out. It should lock into place in there if you've got it all the way inserted. Then we took our airline from there and we just follow our factory wiring down the frame, zip tying it to the factory wiring as we go back. Because we know our factory wiring is routed in a way that's not going to hit any moving components like our suspension and anything excessively hot like our exhaust. We just stay above the suspension components and the frame and above our spare tire, and we come out right here. I looped the excess up and zip tied the bundle up there. Then I routed it through the opening here in the hitch. Once we get through this opening, our hitch has a couple of holes on the side where we just mounted both of the fittings up to right here. We did have to add some fender washers to it because the holes were a bit too large for the factory nuts and washers. We just put those behind there. You can get that at your local hardware store. You do also have the option to drill holes and then put these wherever you like. We were just trying to use existing ones because they're in a convenient location, and that way we don't have to make any modifications to the customer's vehicle. And on our passenger side, we did similar routing, staying near factory wiring to avoid anything excessively hot or moving, going all the way back. Once we get to the back here, we do route it across. It does kind of stay above the spare tire there a little bit due to length. And then it gets bundled up over here as well. It passes through, and it's mounted just next to the other fitting, so we can easily air up both sides conveniently here at the back on the driver's side. And now the moment you've been waiting for, you can test it out to make sure they work. So we're just going to go ahead and air them up. You should see the vehicle lift up. And now that our system's pressurized, we want to make sure we don't have any leaks. Often you're not going to hear any leaks unless they're extremely bad, they're audible. So what we're going to use is soapy water to check for any leaks. Because if we have leaks, soapy water is going to create bubbles. We've got bubbles that just came out there, but what we're looking for is continuous bubbles, as if somebody was blowing bubbles. And that would be the air escaping from our fittings. Looks like we're all good at these fittings back here, so we're going to check the ones at the bag. And if you have any other fittings in line that you may add for other accessories, you want to check those as well. With no leaks detected, we can go ahead and adjust the pressure to whatever we've got in our load there. If you're currently completely unloaded, you just want to have about 5 pounds in there. That's the minimum to keep the system safe. And we can go ahead and put our caps back on. And that completes our look and installation at Airlift's LoadLifter XL airbags on our 2020 Ford F-350 Super Duty.